Good evening everyone. My name's Warren Mailley-Smith and I'm a concert pianist from London. Welcome to St Mary Le Strand, and this is a weekly broadcast on my channel at 5:30 p.m. every Wednesday evening. So thanks for joining me, and big thanks to everyone who tuned in last week. And I wanted to jump straight in and say particular thanks to Richard, who got in touch with a really interesting question about, in fact, a couple of questions about performance. And I wanted to actually split that into a few things this week, and also talking a bit more about it next week as well, because there's some really interesting things to explore with that whole idea of performing. So the first question that he asked was about how to stay focused in performance, and that is a great question, because there are, to be honest, there's a lot of potential distractions when we're playing the piano in public, and not even just the piano, but I think just performing in general, whatever your instrument might be, or indeed if you sing. But there's a few things I think that make playing the piano a slightly special case, because when we're playing, obviously we're looking down at our hands, we're not actually facing the audience, so we've got this kind of side profile, and so there can often be a lot of sounds and things happening in the audience, coughs, sneezes, shuffles, things getting dropped, sweet wrappers, occasionally the odd mobile phone might go off, or text alert. So there can be a lot of just things in the background, and of course when we're practicing, we tend to be surrounded by silence and have no distractions at all, and so it can be quite a different environment when suddenly we walk out in front of 200-300 people and become the centre of attention. So I just had a couple of thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this idea of how to stay focused in performance. But please do put your thoughts and or even any questions about what I'm saying. So just a few of my thoughts, Richard, to answer your question. I think the first thing is to make sure that that you feel comfortable before you start, and of course that's a big part of the rehearsal process, is making sure that your piano stool, for example, or your stand, or the distance that you are from the instrument, that everything is set as you need it to be. But really important is when you come on to perform, is that we don't just get with the excitement of the occasion, we don't just launch straight into playing, but just to take a bit of time to check that everything is as you need it to be, because there's nothing worse than actually starting and realising kind of halfway through the first phrase that you're sitting a bit too low, or even that you're too far away from the instrument. So that's really important. Also, sounds crazy, but remember to breathe. I think breathing is something that when we play the piano is quite easy to forget about, because it's not something, I think, that is essential to the mechanics of putting our fingers down. Very different if you sing, of course, or if you play a woodwind instrument. But I think it's so important to have places in the music where you breathe, to make sure that you're breathing with the phrases, not just for kind of musical reasons, but I think it helps us to stay relaxed and focused on our performance. So think about your breathing, especially at the beginning, when you come on, before you launch into your opening phrase. I think focus as much as you can on communicating. So when you're performing, with all of these different things that may or may not be happening in the audience, or from the audience, or even outside the building, for example, there might be a police siren, or some noise from the street, depending on how well soundproofed your venue is. It can be so helpful to just channel all of your thoughts and all of your focus on communicating what you want to say with the music. It can be very, very easy for a small sound to kind of lead you out of that experience of the music and to actually think about what's happening in the room. And ideally that's something that I think all performers want to avoid as much as possible. So really focus on this idea of communication with the music. I think also try not to dwell on wrong notes or a little slip if that does happen in a performance. I think all of our practice is we obsess about getting perfection and things going as we want them to go. But of course, being human and in a live performance, anything can happen. So I think if something does happen, it doesn't go quite according to plan, it's very helpful to try and play this kind of almost mind tricks with yourself where you don't worry about it, you just let it go. You always be focusing on what's coming up, what the next musical phrase is around the corner, rather than dwelling on what's just happened. And I think you can even take that further and say, well, when things go, even trying not to be assessing too much how things are going. For example, you might think of a phrase that something's gone really well, a passage that you've been working on that's very difficult and it's come off really well. It's just trying to switch off that voice where you're kind of thinking about whether it's gone badly or gone well, and just to constantly be focusing on what's coming up and that journey of the music. So I think as soon as you start thinking about how a performance is going, you can lose your focus on actually what you're doing. So yeah, maybe a final thought is just trying not to indulge too much in the emotion of the music as well, and just let the music itself kind of do that for the audience, rather than as a performer getting too emotionally involved, because that can actually affect the physicality, the physical control that you've got over, well, from a technical perspective. I remember I once had a teacher who he always used to say, let the music speak for itself, and try not to put too much of yourself into the music when you're performing, because again it can tip the balance if you're not careful of where your focus is. And I think personally that your focus should always be on the music. But anyway guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts and any additional thoughts, or if you disagree with what I've said there, be great to share your opinion. So I'd like to switch now to our practice tip of the week, and something that I get asked about all the time after concerts and on piano courses is about how to practice and how to play from memory. Something that we often see pianists doing a lot, which is just sitting down and performing a whole program or just single pieces from memory. And it's really something that we can develop the skill and confidence of doing. And I think my my tip for improving and developing the skill is to recognise straight away that we've got lots of different types of memory that can help us to be reliable when we're performing. And of course we've got the muscle memory that we all develop when we're just practicing through sustained hours of practice, and suddenly if we do it enough times, then our fingers sort of know what to do. And that's a really helpful type of memory. But also is oral memory, is this ability to translate the sounds that we've got in our head into movements in our fingers. And I think that can be as simple as just taking a simple melody or a Christmas carol or a pop song, something that you probably never seen the music to in your life, but just working out from what you can hear in your head, whether the notes go one step higher or two steps higher, and just developing that skill, not even with the pieces that you're performing, but just with, as I say, with stuff that you're really familiar with. Oral listening memory, I think, is such an important part of what we're doing when we're performing from memory. And then there's the visual memory of what the score looks like. You call it photographic memory. And again, we don't necessarily have to have a photographic memory, but just really familiarising yourself with what the music looks like on the page, so that you can sort of draw on that image of a bar or even a tricky passage that can help you to stick to the right notes. And then there's, I think, another really great type of memory that we have on the piano is this kind of visual memory of the keys, this kind of sequence of whether we go from, let's say a low F sharp up to a high A. Actually familiarising yourself with what those patterns look like from where you're sitting. And there's lots of other types of memory as well. Structural memory, for example, is very helpful. I'm going to leave you guys to explore that. Please do come back with questions about it. But my practice tip for this week is to work on your ability to play by ear, because that tends to be something that is treated very separately, I think, from actually reading the notes on the page. Of course, in our piano lessons we're taught to sight read, and that's so important that we can do that. But I think the ability to play by ear can help us massively when we're learning something by memory, because it just gives us that extra bit of confidence that the sounds we've got in up here, what we're about to do is what matches, that we can make that link between the sounds in our head and the shapes in our hands. So let me know how that goes. It's a great experiment if it's not something that you do very often. Give yourself a simple tune that you've never seen the music for and just figure out how it goes. Okay, so last week I asked you guys a question, and I think we had a few right answers, but the question was, which composer did Stravinsky describe as being a 6-foot scowl? And that was, of course, Rachmaninoff, the great Russian virtuoso pianist. So my question this week is, what was the very last piece that Chopin wrote, pretty much on his deathbed? I'd love to hear your answers on that. I'm going to play for you now a fantastic piece by Beethoven. This is the movement from the Pathetique Sonata, and I just remember hearing this as a kid and was so blown away by it. It just made me want to go and learn it. I think it really is one of those pieces. So have a great week. Thanks for listening, and look forward to hearing from you guys. Cheers.